This afternoon. Appreciate everybody being here. I don't appreciate that you got it as cold as you did, though. I'd prefer to not have to go outside. Tonight we have with us on the panel, we have Reed Phillips is on the end there, R.D. Campbell, I'm Richard Tatton, Tom Peluso, and Commissioner Jake Miller are our panel. And just want to remind everybody that if on the panel, if you have a conflict of interest on any of these items, be sure to make it known so we can note that. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball. Somebody's hit me.
Has everyone on the panel had an opportunity to look at the minutes, and do we need to make any changes or correction in those?
I'll make a motion to approve them as written unless somebody else has any changes. I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve the minutes from the October 10th, 2017 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Then we have the minutes from the November 7th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at those?
I'll also make a motion to approve them as written unless somebody else has some changes.
I'll second your motion.
It's been moved and seconded. We accept those minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. The first item we have to review tonight is the possible approval for a conditional use permit for metallurgical tower located on parcel 2A-227 east of Schofield in the watershed zone for EPD Renewable / Castle Valley Wind Farm. And we have with us their representatives, Aaron and Virginia. They're hiding back here. Why don't you come up and stand there, so if we have some questions of you, we can pick on you.
Absolutely.
And is it, the panel noted, we have had quite a bit of information on these people as to what they're doing. But if you would, Aaron or Virginia, whoever is a spokesman for you, tell us a little bit what you're doing and a little bit about the background of your company.
Absolutely, and I just want to start by saying thank you to the Commission for your time today. Is this volume appropriate? Can you hear me okay? So I'm Aaron Branham. I'm a Senior Project Development Manager with EDP Renewables, and this is my colleague, Virginia Wiseman. She is a project developer with our company, and we are here today representing the Castle Valley Wind Farm and our application for a conditional use permit for a meteorological tower, or a tower to measure the wind speed. As background, the company develops, constructs, owns, and operates wind farms and solar power facilities. We are headquartered in Houston, Texas, and employ over 400 people across the U.S., including in our headquarters, as well as 15 different offices across 12 states and a province and 1 state in Mexico. Looking at the next slide, you can get thank you, Doris. You can get a sense of our geographical presence, which spreads across North America from coast to coast. We have 41 operating wind energy facilities and 2 operating solar farms. 3 more of those will be added this year in South Carolina. You can see those on your map. But today we're here talking about the proposal for using the property for a meteorological tower. A meteorological tower is our tool to assess the viability of a site by measuring the wind speed. Our intention is to install one of these towers at the end of 2017 and one of these towers in 2018 at our proposed site. The mast itself will be a lattice-style tower constructed for this site. It will stand 95 meters in height and will have 3 anchors at a radius of approximately 200 feet from the base of the tower. If we can move on to the next slide, please. This slide shows the location of the tower relative to Eagle Canyon Road, which will be one of the primary access points for the location. And on the following slide, you can see a zoomed-in view on an aerial background showing the foundation of the tower at location B1 and the 3 anchor points at locations B2, B3, and B4.
Moving on to the next slide. In terms of any potential health effects, Met towers do not have any impact on the air or water because they don't emit any pollutants. And they also don't use water, nor do they require a sewage or disposal hookup. And the small amount of energy that they require is fueled by a solar panel, just a small one. Data is primarily collected remotely. It can also be collected on-site manually. And then annual maintenance happens to inspect the tower, make sure that data collection is accurate, and then we do maintenance as needed to ensure safety. On the next slide, speaking of safety, this is always EDPR's first priority. We have been coordinating closely with the landowners, for instance, to make sure that we're doing the installation outside of hunting season. And then we communicate with our crew that will be installing the tower to let them know what safety measures they should be taking and installing. For instance, we'll be putting in an anti-climb equipment and then marker balls to designate the guy wires. And then we're not only concerned about human safety, but also animal safety. And so we'll be fencing the base of the tower as well as the anchor points to deter livestock. And then we'll be using bird diverters on the guy wires as well. And then finally, I'll talk about this more in relation to permits, but the tower will have a painting and lighting scheme to alert aircraft in the area as required by the Federal Aviation Administration. On the next slide, with regard to noise, Met towers themselves are silent fixtures. There will be some noise associated with construction activities, but these are limited primarily to trucks traveling to the site on the roadway, pouring concrete, and bolting steel. And the actual site is quite far from any sort of population center or residence. It's tucked away in the middle of 3,500 acres owned by the same property owner, and the closest property line is about a quarter mile away. And that property owner has also been consulted and is actively working with us on our wind project proposal. The next slide. In relation to the administrative framework that you've put in place for your county, we believe that a wind project like ours would be in line with the Carbon County Master Plan. It would be a new type of development, helping diversify the local economy, bringing jobs, and would be a new property tax base as well. And then we can't stress enough how much this Met tower, or a Met tower in general, is critical to the development of a wind farm ultimately. Finally, before I turn it back over to Aaron, we think that the Met towers should be perfectly compatible with the current zoning, which is watershed. That the county code states that the traditional uses of the land should be able to continue, and this tower won't affect any of those uses. And then it also won't have an impact on the watershed itself.
So go to the next slide, please. So EDP Renewables and the Castle Valley Wind Farm have already contracted with DNV-GL to install the Met tower no later than the end of the year, weather permitting. DNV-GL is a worldwide expert in the energy industry, both in wind consulting as well as the installation of Met towers such as this one. Next slide, please. With regards to what county roads will be used to access the site and install the tower, the site is anticipated to be accessed through Broads Canyon Road off of Highway 96, and then through Eagle Canyon Road, which is a private roadway. No upgrades to the roads will be required, and the transport of the equipment will be done by normal light vehicles. This could include a pickup truck. The heaviest equipment may include a concrete truck or an excavator, and a small boom crane to erect the tower. Next slide, please. Conditions relating to the effect of the use on the neighboring and nearby properties were addressed by Virginia briefly, but just to reiterate, the presence of the Met tower is fully compatible with the current land use, and we have worked closely with the landowner to take measures such as cattle guards to prevent interaction and negative interactions between cattle and the equipment. Let's see. In addition, the Met tower should not impede future uses, as the tower is temporary and anticipated to be installed for a maximum of 4 years.
Then moving on. So as it concerns the environment, our environmental team analyzed the area for any impacts when we were studying the location for the tower. And our goal is to always minimize those impacts whenever possible. As mentioned before, the team found that there would be no negative impacts on the watershed. There are birds in the area, so as I stated before, we'll be using bird diverters on the guy wires.
What is a bird diverter?
It's a kind of, looks like a coil on the guy wire, and it allows the bird to see that the guy wire is there, preventing collision.
More visible.
Yes,
It's a
exactly.
common tool used in transmission lines and other just large wires, cellular tower wires, that kind of structure.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. And then otherwise, wildlife, including big game and thus recreational hunting, are not anticipated to be affected. As regards aesthetics, I would just repeat the same thing that I said about noise. It's in a very remote, the tower is in a very remote area, and the nearest landowner is very aware and is involved in the project as well. And then lastly, on the permits, the only two that we need from the county are the conditional use permit and building permit, as we understand from Todd. And then the only other permit we need is it's not really a permit, but it's a determination of no hazard from the Federal Aviation Administration. We've already received that, and we will be required to file a form with them within 5 days of the structure reaching its maximum height. And then that determination of no hazard also describes the painting scheme, which is the red and white alternating stripes, as you saw in an earlier photo, and then the lighting that we'll need, which is the red light at night. And I think with that, we just want to thank you for your time, and we really appreciate you taking under consideration our application for a conditional use permit, and we are happy to take any questions that you have.
The panel have any questions?
I was just going to ask, maximum of 4 years is how long this tower is going to be up, and do you foresee utilizing that tower and its equipment here locally somewhere else, or relocating it completely to another location?
the towers are typically manufactured for the specific site at which they will be located. Because these are taller towers with a foundation, it's difficult to relocate them. We do anticipate installing an additional tower, but that would be fabricated and designed and fabricated for the specific location that would become after this one.
And
So
when you,
the answer would be no. In short, it would be explicit for this site.
and so when you do remove this one after 4 years, then that would include the cement footers and everything?
Correct. We have an agreement to remove infrastructure to a certain depth so as to not cause an undue burden upon decommissioning.
Mhm.
We don't want to rip up and make huge holes, but we also have agreements with the landowner for specific remediation that they would like to see. So there has been an agreement between the company and the landowner to ensure that upon decommissioning, the land is restored to a condition that is acceptable to them.
This is obviously not your first rodeo.
I've done it once or twice.
I see you have anemometers of different heights. I guess that's just to determine what's the ideal height to set the.
Correct. So it's important to know how wind speeds change at different heights because there is a metric called shear. So it's not always a linear relationship between height and wind speed. Sometimes it can increase exponentially. So this helps us establish what height the turbine will be maximally efficient.
Do you have any problems with people shooting at these? Of course, this is going to be on private property, so that'll help there.
Not specifically. The tower itself is a lattice tower, so to hit it itself is difficult. When it comes to wind turbines, we're a bit more sensitive to that subject, and we work very closely with our landowners to ensure that, for instance, we're not doing construction during the hunting season, that hunters using their property are aware of the obligation to not shoot the equipment that has been installed.
I also see you trying to put one up in 2017. We're about done with 2017, so you still, once it gets approved, you're going to start on it right away?
That's correct. We've been running the process with Todd and the permitting for the conditional use permit and the building permit in conjunction with preparing to receive that by contracting. If we don't receive the permit, obviously we'll need to come back and reassess our schedule for installation.
Anything else, gentlemen? I have a question for Todd.
Yes.
We received the application for a conditional use permit, but we didn't receive any of the signatures from the departments.
Oh,
Was that completed, or is that in the
Oh, you
packet
gave
that I
me
didn't
one?
take?
so it is It's completed,
Okay.
so it must not have made it into your packet. And I realize another oversight is the language of the conditional use permit was also not included, and that was an oversight on my part.
So Todd, maybe why don't you just state for the record what signatures you've got or what county departmental approvals you have already?
So I have approval from, let me make sure I'm on the right one. From Daniel Campbell. Okay, hold on. Who's the county road supervisor and also county access. And also Curtis Page, county engineer. And at this point, noxious weeds is not relevant at this point. They're all frozen. We can't see anything, and the amount of area that they're going to disturb isn't going to have effect. And also, there's no UDOT access up there, so that signature is not required either. So Daniel and Curtis are the ones who are relevant to sign it off, and they don't see any concerns with it. And then as far as the conditions of approval, it'll go along with our standard conditions, complying with all laws, regulations for state, federal, and other regulatory agencies, comply with all laws, codes, and ordinances of Carbon County pertaining to the business effect at the time of the issuance of this permit. Any buildings constructed for the project shall comply with the adopted codes, which you guys are working with. We received your all your prints for everything, so we're reviewing those and submitted all those. Keep the area free of debris, refuse, weeds, including but not limited to noxious weeds. No trash or material. And then you mentioned the fence that you'll install, to keep cattle out from there. So typically, we on certain conditional uses, we make them fence the entire property, where in your case, fence the structure that has there, so you don't have issues with wildlife and domestic cattle. So just our standard conditions, I just forgot to include those in your packet.
Gotcha.
Now, one more question. If this works out and the wind is favorable, your company would be the one that puts up the wind towers?
That's correct. So our business model is to develop, own, and operate these facilities.
And at that point, you come back again for...
Right. So this would be explicitly for the Met Tower. There are many other approvals that would obviously be required.
I'm just curious, how many would you expect to put in an area like that if it's favorable? 10, 5?
Given the size of turbines that are currently available and the size of the project that we're pursuing, probably around 20 machines over several thousand acres.
I think it's a good idea myself.
Is that a motion, sir?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve.
There's been a motion to approve a conditional use permit for Metallurgical Tower located on parcel 2A-227. Is there a second to that?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for your
And you
time.
can smile. This isn't that serious a place. There you go.
Just feel in the room.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item we have is the review and possible approval for County Corner Phase 2 subdivision, 5 lots located at 750 West, 1100 North for Carla Sacramento. Carla's here. Do you want to come up and tell us a little bit about your plan? And we did get the copies there of the lots you're going to put in and that sort of thing. So.
Thank you for having me. Todd has all the plans for the approval. We basically had approval the first time that we came. We just did the bond for having phase 2 approved, and we're just working on moving forward with that.
So this phase will require the completion of the road also through the subdivision. I've prepared a development and subdivision improvement agreement that indicates that Carla will post basically a real estate bond, a deed of trust, that has value of it's more than $250,000 worth of the 250% more value than the required cost of the improvements. The required cost of the improvement to put in the road and have that paved is estimated at $56,200. She's secured a deed of trust that she's going to put up as collateral against the completion of that. The amount of security then that would be required to be posted with the county is $70,250. So the property that she's identified is worth well more than that, and she has signed this development agreement that basically says she'll put in those improvements within a year's time. The county keeps 25%. We'll keep a 25% of the cost of the improvements for 1 year's time after they're put in. But in essence, I would think that would just mean the deed of trust would remain in place for that much longer. So I'm satisfied with that. Kevin Callahan, who owns the actual property, has agreed to post that property. He's signed an agreement, a performance bond. It's called a trust deed securing performance bond. He's signed that we can record if you approve approve her to go forward with phase 2 tonight. Todd may have more items, but I think you've seen the plan already. The main thing at this point was just to approve the road and the bond primarily. Isn't that right, Todd?
Yep. And just for your information, they have installed the water and sewer lines. I've talked to Jeff Richens this morning. They're satisfied with everything, with the infrastructure that has been installed so far at this point. And so they'll just be paving, as you can see, to the end of phase 2. So it'll be lots 5 and 8 is where they'll be paving to. And then when she comes in for approval for phases 3 and 4, she'll complete the road that goes to the west, to the east, and then comes back down to the south, back onto 1150 North when those other ones come through. But she's just going to do a portion of the road as it is right now.
Are you comfortable with the road ending there? I know there were some conversations about extending it a few feet further into the future development area there.
I think that'll be sufficient. One of Daniel's biggest concern was having as few as joints as possible, and so there'll only be two joints, so we won't have to worry about any other joints along there, because our concern was if we paved each portion of the phase, that causes problems, and so she's willing to work with doing it in two pieces.
Okay, thanks, sir. Talk to me, guys. What do we want to do? Everybody gets quiet.
I'm smiling.
Sounds good to me. I make a motion to move ahead.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we review and recommend for approval Carla's subdivision at 750 West, 1100 North. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Just my information, when you say 1100 North, we're talking about Price there at 8th North?
No, out by the Questar gas plant in Carbonville off of Woodhill Road.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, that.
I can see the question of pipeline.
Yep.
The next item we have is review and possible approval of a vacation to Green Thumb Minor Sub and an amendment to Green Thumb Phase 1 subdivision located at 3197 East, 4250 South for Gary Scow. Gary, you want to tell us what we're doing?
So I've been working with Gary. This is kind of cleaning up a subdivision that a subdivision that was approved through site plan committee, and also some ag waiver land divisions. So what you can see right now on your slide is his proposal is for 3 lots. Lot 1 and 2, they were part of Green Thumb subdivision. He's extending those lots just all the way back to the back edge of his property.
Now, whereabouts is this roughly?
It's out, I can drive you there.
All right, let's do that.
So go towards Wellington and then head back over the tracks. And then, what's your exact address, Gary?
Just beyond the river bridge there, going to my place.
Okay.
Yeah, 250 South Wellington or 4250 South Carbon County.
Okay.
So here's the aerial of showing what's exactly happening. So he's going, or how it sits now. So the 2 lots that would be on your left will extend all the way up, and then he'll have a 3rd lot that will include his house. They'll take the remaining portion of the property. So it's just cleaning up and making, from my perspective, a better subdivision. So we have to vacate and then have approval for this new subdivision.
Well, for the amended subdivision.
Or
basically.
excuse me.
It's all an amendment,
Yeah.
but we're really mostly just primarily changing lots. We're getting rid of 2 lots, and we'll just have those, then we'll have the 3 lots.
Yeah.
But all the property is Mr. Scow's property, and the surrounding property too, or at least the lots that are being amended or that are going away are all surrounded by Mr. Scow's property and being subsumed into the new ones. So really, there's no other signatures that are required, because it really doesn't affect the boundaries of the.
No.
This doesn't change anybody's property outside of the subdivision.
And there are no structures on this property yet, are there?
My house is on lot 3.
Yeah.
Lot 1 and 2 don't have anything.
Well, now I know what RD stands for. Roy.
Okay, what do we want to do with Mr. Scow? We want to approve the amendment?
I'll go ahead and,
Oh,
You make a motion, I'll second.
I'll make the motion and
I'll second.
it's been moved and seconded that we allow the approval of the amendment for Mr. Scow's subdivision to go to 3 lots. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
That,
So this still has to go to the county commission for approval because of the way our code's written. It doesn't, this is one of those, there's not a whole lot to talk about, but we'll just follow the code. And so, but there will not be a public hearing. It'll be at the public meeting, but no public comment will be taken on it. So thanks for your patience on it.
The next item we have is a review and possible approval of the Carbon County Planning Commission meeting schedule for 2018. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at that? See if there's any conflicting dates? Would accept a motion if it looks good to.
My only comment is our meeting on July 3rd. It seems like when we've had a meeting either before or after a holiday, it seems like we have a struggle getting a quorum. So I was wondering if on July 3rd, if we wanted to bump that to the next week, or if you guys are okay having it on the 3rd.
Makes sense what you say, gives more flexibility.
I'll be here.
For once.
So
You can see, like in September, we moved it to the 11th because it fell on a Tuesday after Labor Day. So we moved it to the next week.
So you're suggesting in July go to the 10th?
Go to the 10th.
Yeah, that sounds.
Oh, is Election Day November 6th? Is that the first Tuesday after? Whoops, I'm on the, let me get to 2018.
What's wrong with the 6th, you're saying?
It's election day.
Election, oh, why is my phone working for me?
That's probably not good.
We might get more people showing up than normal.
Yeah, so we have it as the 6th, which would be, that's actually a Wednesday.
So it's the day before election day?
Oh, hold on. I might have. No, you're right. I was on 2019, so Doris, as usual, is correct. But it is election day on the 6th.
So let's move it.
Move that one to the 13th,
Yeah.
and then July 3rd to the 10th.
Yep.
Seems to be a consensus on those. Is anyone comfortable in making a motion to change that?
I'll make a motion.
Accept it with those two changes?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Did somebody second that? I'm sleeping here. We need a second.
RD did.
RD
I heard
did. Okay.
Roy did.
Did you second that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is, and we've got a special sheet on that, the proposed amendments to the development code for Carbon County. Todd, and I would guess maybe Christian, are you going to chime in on this?
Where Todd needs me to, but I think he can run it.
And the changes
most
are
part.
highlighted. Is that what it is, Todd?
Changes are highlighted. So we can start with, I think one of the biggest changes is in section 2.1.1 with the establishment of commission number of members qualifications. So in the highlighted part, second sentence, it says, said commission shall consist of 7 voting members, 2 alternate members, and at the direction of the Board of County Commissioners, a non-voting liaison member from the Board of County Commissioners. So what that would do is essentially make Commissioner Meller a non-voting liaison member. We'd replace him with another regular voting member. So Jake would still continue to attend all the meetings and be here and have input. But from my perspective, it would reduce any conflict of interest, or he doesn't vote on it here and in county commission meetings, so it removes all of that. Also establishes 2 alternate members. That way we can make sure we always have a quorum of 4, so that we can make sure we have a quorum so we can pass any motions. And then it goes on and says the members of the planning commission shall be appointed by the Board of the County Commissioners. Each of the 7 appointed members of the planning commission shall be a resident of the county, own real property, and at least 4 of them shall hold no other public office. And that's all the same as it was before. So the biggest thing is creating Jake, or making Jake a non-voting liaison member. That's the biggest change.
And
in that
adding the
section.
2 alternates.
And
who can-
adding the 2 alternates.
who can attend. So an alternate would step in if there were less than a full, if less than all 7 of you were here, we'd have at least one of the alternates step in, and we'd have both alternates step in if we were missing 2 members.
Correct. Term of office, each member of the planning commission shall serve for 4 years. The term of office for the liaison member shall be determined by the action of the Board of County Commissioners. So we'll leave that up to the county commissioner to determine how long that person, is the liaison. Vacancies, removal for office, it's the same except for the last sentence. Attending fewer than half of all regularly scheduled meetings of the planning commission within a year's time shall be considered non-performance of duty, and be able to replace that person and not have to be able to show non-performance of duty or misconduct. So at least 6 meetings a year. Then we get into probably the biggest changes. We currently have a Board of Adjustments. State code and the trainings and the things that I've been to have all recommended going to a public hearing officer, allowing a person to have to go to a public hearing officer rather than to the full Board of Adjustments. We usually only have I've only been here a year, so we've only had 1 meeting. We get like 1 meeting a year, various things. So this just restructures it so we have a public hearing officer rather than a full board to view these things.
Isn't this consistent with what other
places in the state are doing.
Yep, it's consistent with other places in the state. They've gone to this route. Sometimes Board of Adjustments can be convoluted, making sure they're trained properly and stick to what's relevant and what the Board of Adjustments can review and what they can't review, and keeping them on track sometimes has caused issues.
And also the land rights, what's he called? The property rights ombudsman is strongly advocating a move towards this, because what he sees is a lot of times you get a Board of Adjustments which somebody asks for a variance and they feel bad for the guy not being able to have a shed, and so they don't look at it, they don't weigh the legal issues, they weigh the emotional issues. I think for the most part our board have done very well, but you get people who live around the block who feel bad for somebody, and they're not looking at it from a strict legal, do they satisfy all the legal and factual requirements. So that's what he's really advocating for, and we think it'll make it easier too.
So as it goes through, all land use decisions made or issued by the land use authority designated herein may be appealed to an administrative hearing officer within 30 days of the issuance of the decision of the land use authority, which will be you guys. We went over through section 5 that will designate you, the planning commission, in most cases as the land use authority, and in certain cases designates me as the zoning administrator as the land use authority on minor things. Then it goes through the variances. A request for a waiver of or a variance to a land use ordinance shall be heard by an administrative hearing officer. Variances and waivers that may be considered include but not limited to the following: building setbacks, height requirements, exploratory or production wells, parking facilities, landscaping, utility requirements, livestock locations. Those are the things that we get questions asked most about us, and that's where we'll have an hearing officer to determine those things.
So a variance could be deemed to be an appeal. Typically, though, it's just something that, nobody has it'll basically be, Todd will say the code doesn't allow for it, so you got to go to the hearing officer. So appeals and variances are two different things, but they're really, I guess you could both be called appeals of denials of a decision. So, and then the conduct of the hearing, they will apply the same standards. If I could talk about conduct of public hearings, the intent is not to make them strict. You don't have to follow strict courtroom rules of evidence. They can be done informally. The hearing officer can hear hearsay or say, this is how I understand this, and so said this about this, and you don't have to have a witness introduce each piece of paper that you want to testify or that you want to have considered. So it's an informal type hearing. And then the standards on variances would be the same that have been used throughout the years and are currently, these are the same standards that we have now and that are considered by courts when they consider variances. So it's just pretty boilerplate, but there they are.
And then moving on to the powers and duties of the zoning administrator, this is more just cleanup language, where it talks about on item D in 2.3.2 D, upon the appeal to the administrative officer or on matters heard and decided by the land use authority designated under this code, the zoning administrator shall forthwith transmit all papers, records, exhibits, and other pertinent data containing to the appeal thereto. So we had to change this. It used to say Board of Adjustments, so we've changed it to Administrative Hearing Officer instead of Board of Adjustments. So that's what
all those changes
are relevant to. Then the last thing is our Site Plan Review Committee in section 2.4. because we are changing from a Board of Adjustments to a public hearing officer, the Board of Adjustments chairman or chairperson used to sit on our site plan review committee. Well, we changed that to an at-large member designated by the Board of County Commissioners, so we can complete a 7-member site plan review committee. So that's what we've changed for that. And this is just review, just for your information. We'd like to each month bring a section of the development code, have you review it. So next month we would like to do a public hearing, take any comments from you as the Planning Commission, and then do a public hearing in January for section 2 and start that process. And then we'll have another section in January to bring to you to review as we do the public hearing for section 2. So we kind of each month review a section, approve a section, and keep going through our different sections of our development code and fine tune and streamline some of our processes.
Christian, to set this for public hearing, is that this body?
Yes, you have to have a public hearing on this
So we need a motion
matter.
tonight to set a public hearing date, like at our next meeting, to approve these changes.
Doris is trying to tell us something.
It's just a review on the agenda. It's not showing an approval.
You're talking about tonight. You know, yeah, and Richard's saying, should we take a motion to set it for a public hearing, which I think is fine. Yeah, and I would recommend we do that. That you go ahead and make that motion to set it for public hearing as written. You can discuss it if you want. If any of you have changes or suggestions to this tonight that you'd like to see made before we bring it to that public hearing, or that we incorporate and bring to you at the public hearing, you could certainly discuss that tonight as well.
And I'm looking at you two. Would January be too soon?
No, we're ready to
No.
go because these changes are not nearly as comprehensive as the past sections. So
Right.
if any of you have thoughts or concerns you want to discuss,
Well,
certainly could do that.
I think that what you guys have outlined, Todd and Christian, is fantastic, and I'll go ahead and make the motion that we put that forward for a public review, public meeting, and that we schedule that.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. We move ahead with making a public meeting for, is that the right word on that?
Public
Right,
hearing,
it's January. Any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Motion to adjourn.
And
It seems like county commissioners have had experience at setting public meetings and hearings and keeping the newspaper alive. Did you want to do that, Jay?
Oh, goodness.
I was gonna ask, is everything you guys doing not gonna affect any of this stuff we're talking about so far as the?
You know, I really don't think so. Maybe more people pay attention to it, but I think the changes are in the public's best interest, so if anything else, it'll just bring more awareness to some good things that are going towards the code, the development code. So
And you'll be the final approval with commission on this, right?
Yes, so you'll have the public hearing, and then after the public hearing, the county commission will have to approve this as well.
Mhm.
So, for example, the section 5 changes that we had the public hearing on and that you recommended go forward to the commission is going to consider those on December 20th. And at that point, if they approve them, that will be the new conditional use permit section of our development code.
which will be fantastic.
And one other item that came to my mind, the Planning Commission terms expire for Mr. Campbell. I talked to him before the meeting, and he's hasn't applied for another term.
Hasn't?
Has not.
What's the matter with you?
So this will be Mr. Campbell's last meeting as a Planning Commission member.
I make a motion, we tear up his land somehow, you know.
So, and we appreciate all the work you've done in the year and a half I've been here. We appreciate your insight to everything you've done and your expertise that you provided for us. We're going to miss all the knowledge and everything that you have, but appreciate your service that you've given to Carbon County and to the Planning Commission over these last several years. Many years. So I asked him if I was born when he was put on Planning Commission. Because I've looked at some documents. I've seen Richard's signatures on some documents, and I think I was 4 or 5 years old when he started signing things for Planning Commission. So
I was 4 or 5 too, so that was quality.
Oh, how funny.
So we'll have a few changes. We have people hopefully applying for Planning Commission. So come January, we're going to have several new members because Don obviously resigned. Artie's, this is his last meeting, and then replacement of Jake and 2 alternates. So the body is going to shift a little bit with some new members as they're coming forward.
And I think it behooves us as a panel, if we have someone we think that would be good on this group, to get the names to these 2 so we can get that done.
Yeah, and we've received.
Who picks, is the county commissioners?
Yes, the county commissioners
Appoint.
the members of the planning commission. So we'll review the applications as they come in, and we'll get those taken care of here in the next several weeks.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, anyone? Hearing nothing, would accept a motion to